can't hear you.
Oh, I have it recording just in case we say something. I'll cut this out. You can't hear me? Let's see. Huh. No?
Nope.
Output. Oh, your AirPods, maybe.
Yeah.
Chat.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, cool.
So
Yeah.
it was strange.
Huh.
I was logged in before. I logged in like 5 minutes early to get all set up, but
Oh.
nothing happened. So then when you sent the other link, I just joined.
Oh,
So it was
yeah, I
weird.
was yeah, I was on a call with Brody talking about some plans for our team for next year because we had finished. I hadn't made the announcement yet, but we finished third for healthiest employers and mid-sized companies for the
Ooh,
Phoenix Business Journal.
exciting!
Yeah,
That is
so
awesome.
so Mike flew in, and he has so much energy. And we were talking about, okay, he's a very competitive cycler and he has all of his numbers down and right there on his phone. He's like, okay, so what are we going to do to blow it out of the water next year? So we started brainstorming and talking about, okay, let's gather information to find out what wellness looks like company wide so that we can see where we're spending our time and energy and then
Yeah.
really focus on wellness as a company as a whole to fill in the gaps. So it was really great
Love it.
conference.
Love it.
So
So
pressure's on.
where
Pressure's
that's
on.
awesome. That's awesome. I bet that's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So where does Mike live?
He's in Dallas. So
Oh,
he's
okay.
a Worldwide Express. So yeah, it
From
was,
Worldwide. Okay.
yeah.
Got it.
So excited.
Wellness program before GlobalTranz?
Well, I just spoke with Brody, so I did get some feedback. That was one of the questions I had for him. So they started it when COVID happened.
Okay.
So yeah, they're kind of new to that space. But now with the hybrid model still staying in place from here on out, he felt that they would continue because they did see a lot of employee engagement and felt that it was really supporting the team. So
Yeah. That's exciting. Very
yeah,
cool. Very cool.
so I gave him a whole spiel about our wellness center at GlobalTranz and Renee and Bob coming in and creating this opportunity for employees and then
Yep.
creating this position which is unheard of in our space, which I also had communicated to Mike. So that I think is a driving force that we really can help with not only retention of employees, because a lot of people aren't aware of like some of the things that we do in this space, but also for recruitment processes. So anyway, good conversation. I took a ton of notes.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love that you bring up the retention item because I think that is more that how much this has an impact of that, just and I'll talk a little bit about that today, but yeah, it's I think that it's definitely a big point, with retention. I think employees are starting to realize, you got to start to create those healthy balances, or it's not sustainable.
Yeah, I agree. So I went back and I looked at the announcement that came out. So I was thinking we'd start the pod together. Dustine kind of showcasing how we've celebrated what you bring to our community as the VP of, how would you say that? Procurement?
Opt-in procurement.
Yeah. So I'm going to be honest. I don't know a lot about your role. at GlobalTranz, and how that's meshing forward. But so yeah, I thought that we could open up the pod, really showcasing and spotlighting some of what you referenced when we celebrated you during Women's History Month, Dustine, and kind of talk about a little bit about some of the. I know that I didn't throw this at you in the email, but
Sure. No,
kind of talk. Like I went through and I read what you wrote about your journey, and there were a couple things that I really resonated with me. I think that would resonate with listeners, particularly females. But I wanted you to start out first, kind of introducing yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great.
So tell our listeners.
All right. So we'll start now.
Yeah, let's go.
All right. Yeah. Well, my name is Dustine Hannum, and I'm Vice President of Opt-in Procurement at GlobalTranz. And I have had the wonderful opportunity of working for GlobalTranz since 2010. It was actually my second job right out of college. I spent the first couple years within my career at a local transportation company before I joined GlobalTranz in 2010. So a truly just wonderful experience, to say the least. I wouldn't necessarily say roller coaster ride in a bad way. It's been a roller coaster ride in a wonderful way. I would definitely say more highs than lows, but a truly great leadership team that I've been able to work with throughout the years and been involved with. I started out as one of the few female leaders at the company. I think I took my first management role, I want to say it was 2014. There, kind of just worked my way up through the company under various leaders. And now I'm happy to say that we have a wide of leaders now that work trans umbrella, whether that's through the legacy global, some of the acquisitions and mergers that we've done, but then of course more so now with some of the recent larger scale mergers that we've done. So very lucky in that regard. Our CEO Renee Krug, of course, was a great inspiration and leader while I was able to work under her through the years. So so it's been a really exciting ride, and I love being able to be in this role and being able to inspire and work alongside other female colleagues, and really just foster and promote and encourage other women, especially in this male-dominated industry, to really take on the challenge, because it's not easy in this type of environment at times.
So, wow, 2014. That's when you took your first. Was it with GlobalTranz? Obviously, yeah, because you said 2010.
It was. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and at the time, I'll never forget. In those times, we were doing a lot of hiring, and so every month we would have a new class of hirees that would join, and we're talking around 20 people a month, and they would have the leaders come in, introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their history, and I'll never forget, probably about the third or fourth class in, I was the only female manager in the room, doing those introductions. And I'll never forget, about the third or fourth class in, I actually had a girl raise her hand and asked, she was just very confused. Why are there not more female managers? Why is there 1 out of 10? And I was taken a little bit off guard by that, because I hadn't actually thought about it myself. I kind of just done the work and took the first manager role in 2014, and that's when I had first truly realized, wow, I mean, she's right. Out of 10 that is an actual female in this management function, and that's when it kind of hit me that I really need to start to foster, as these people come in, and encourage them you know, to rise up and not be afraid of the challenge. Because I think that's what happens in a male dominant industry. I think a lot of women become very, you know, cognizant of that, and it at times can turn them away from really taking that challenge by the horns and running with it. So it was definitely eye-opening back in, that was probably about 2015 when it happened.
Yeah, if I go back in time, you know, even in my career, it was very health and wellness, very male dominated, particularly in the athletics department. A lot of competition, and you know, it's interesting. For me, at least, there was never any formal management training on how to be a manager. You had to kind of learn yourself, particularly with startup operations. And looking at you and reading that recent article that the team put out for you through Engage, something that you had wrote kind of resonated with me. And I think just from my perspective, a lot of women maybe get stuck in this space of, you know, we're taught by society to be the caregivers and to kind of, regardless of maybe how we're feeling about what we're being told to do or expectations, we kind of stay pleasant, the nice factor. We're more agreeable, we're less prone to maybe confrontation. And we kind of settle in content, and we don't really feel comfortable having a voice. And, you know, for me, I definitely felt that. I feel like I was always seen as the nice gal, the nice manager. People would come to me with their problems, this and that. And, you know, I have a very kind, compassionate side to me where I feel a lot of empathy, which you also had referenced. And I think that sometimes we, as ladies, confuse the two words, like niceness and kindness. I see them very differently. And kindness, I think, as you've demonstrated, opens the doors, because now we can build a team of people that trust us. They trust that they can bring their emotional struggles, their mental struggles, maybe it's even personal, into the workplace, and say, hey, you know, I need support, I need support, some advice, and they feel trusting. I think because women, we are seeing more of these caregivers. And I think if anything, the pandemic has taught people that still kind of don't value female leadership. We see now how important that is. But then I still think that as females, at least for me, like, I still want to be nice. And maybe I don't voice my opinion as much, because there's this inherent belief system that if I say what's truly on my mind, for instance, maybe I ask for a salary increase, you know, there's that fear of, what if I'm rejected? What if I lose my job because I've asked it for this? You know, sometimes can put us in a place where we're not really fostering our health and well-being in the workplace or at home in a way that's helpful for anybody, really.
Sure.
So anyway,
no, I think you bring up a lot of really good points, because throughout my career, I've kind of been forced to do a lot of discovery in that field of being a woman, not only in a leadership role, but in a male-dominated industry, you know, carrying that leadership role. So I've had to do a lot of discovery along the way of, to your point, women, as you know, we're raised as a environments are supposed to be people pleasers, they're supposed to be the caretakers, they're supposed to be agreeable. It's like we're taught to, you know, stay in between the lines, do things correctly, whereas the men are almost encouraged to not fully do the opposite, but you know, it's okay to, you know, take risks and break the rules, you know, if you can get ahead. So it's almost like we're just ingrained to be entirely different than how men are ingrained to be. So it at times is kind of a struggle, right, of getting out of that. And feeling and being okay with that. You know, it's okay to take risks. To your point, a risk could be asking for a raise, right? Whereas in a man's world, they have no problem. You know, the thought might even cross their mind because they were kind of raised that those risks are okay to ask for. Those risks are okay to take. Whereas, you know, females, it's just ingrained differently. So trying to kind of break that mold, and also being okay with that, right? Accepting that that's okay. You know, it is a challenge, and you know, definitely a struggle at times. But, you know, I mentioned in the article that as a woman, I've had a very unique opportunity to be able to take my kindness and empathy for people in their scenarios, and really make a deep impact with that. Because, you know, as we'll get farther along and talk about, you know, some of the challenges over, you know, the last 2 years, and creating that healthy leadership role and environment for the employees, I feel like I've been able to kind of translate that to them and make them feel comfortable in speaking up of, hey, this is what I need. It's okay to talk about, you know, my mental health. And as an employee, this is how I feel, you know, and then as it's inspired my leaders to be able to say, okay, this is what I'm hearing are the needs of my employees, what their feelings are. How do we now act upon that? And you know, how do we put out, you know, tangible changes to create a more healthy environment, you know, as leaders. So throughout the years, I have been able to really utilize me being a female leader, and, you know, it has been a very unique opportunity in creating the team that I have today.
So with your experience, you know, and just, if you went back to like 2014 and all the different males in the room with you as leaders, we all have different goals, different objectives, different priorities when it comes to our home life and our work life environment. And sometimes we can be kind of closed-minded to maybe think about how best to support our team in a more helpful way. You know, and I don't know that, you know, with the different men in leadership roles, you know, on their defense, like sometimes men are taught to suppress their feelings, and taught maybe coping skills that aren't the most helpful, because that go, you know, reach whatever success looks like for them. And then, you know, that drive to be the best. Not that women don't have that as well, but I think sometimes men, at least what I've seen, they really aren't in touch with that emotional and mental side. And then subsequently, you know, when you look at our younger population, type 2 diabetes, some folks have already had heart attacks and they're like in their early 30s. Anxiety, depression, substance abuse issues, you know, problems with conflict resolution in a helpful way, where they're not screaming and yelling and unaware of their emotions or even how to regulate their emotions. I see that a lot, and I see and hear there's a lot of nervousness about voicing the need for help.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I'm sure you see that too in your space, and how do you support everyone who maybe have those feelings
all the time? Yeah. You know, today across my team, especially over the last 2 years, I've really tried to encourage, you know, I have working with myself, and then, you know, leading teams. I've always encouraged them, you know, all of them are male except for one. You know, I have 6 managers, one of them being a female. So even in a leadership role, that also has its challenges, because I also have to lead them in helping them understand that it's, you know, we do need to listen to our employees. We do need to listen, you know, to their feelings. But in a way of, you know, we want that feedback. You know, an important thing is through the years, a lot of times, for example, when I first started out, at my very first job, I'll say as an example, we never talked about, you know, mental It was all just work, work, work. It really was not a priority, right? It was just, you come in, you're going to work 60 hours a week for minimum pay just to keep your job. Just the thought of bringing up mental health or even discussing work-life balance just was not a thing. It wasn't a priority. So you fast forward to now throughout the years, and I'm so thankful that it has become such a large priority, to your point, because there's just so many issues now, I think, coming rising up from the depths that a lot of this stuff has caused. So now, it's important for me to talk to my managers and my fellow leaders of, hey, we want to get feedback from our employees. We want to understand what they're going through from a mental health perspective. It really all comes down to feedback for me. And so I try to press upon that to my leaders who are male, who at times might necessarily understand for themselves, right? Because they've been ingrained to kind of lead and conduct business in a certain manner. But, so that's also created more opportunity, from a unique perspective as a female leader, is I've been able to, influence them to take that and especially over the last 2 years, we've learned so much from the pandemic on, conducting a healthy workforce and work environment for individuals. But it's been great. It's been a really positive and healthy journey, for myself, I think, and my other managers, and how we want to treat our employees in not only a healthy way, but again, just foster that open communication of them not being afraid, like to your point, of coming to us with feedback and saying, hey, here's where I'm struggling, whether it's workload or working more on that work-life balance. We want them to feel comfortable enough to communicate those needs to us as leaders, so then we can in turn go and make tangible changes to support that for them. So that's kind of how I've viewed it over the years of, working also alongside with me.
When I look back at my career and my managers, most of which had been male, it was very transactional. Okay, here's the job description. Here's what you need to do, and there was no conversation about emotions at all. And if you felt you're going to get emotional, you would excuse yourself pretty quickly and go have a chit chat, like, what's wrong with you, Rhonda? Pull your shit together, And there was really a fear of that, and I can recall a couple times where I started to sweat. I started to feel my blood rolling, and I'm like, okay, this is potentially going to be an anxiety attack or something. Like, I need to move my body and get out of this space. So I just excused myself. But I will say, to my previous manager's defense, again, that was just the way the culture was back then. If you showed any type of emotion, you were considered a risk, and your job was in jeopardy. Pretty much, you would pretty much be canned. And I would say I've had Sue Harriman was my manager at Rider University when we did that startup. She was the first person where I felt comfortable to begin to disclose my emotions. But Dustine, it wasn't until she had something that happened to her that I had to care for her. So she had an injury. I'm not going to disclose what it was, and she was in a state where she had no other family or friends. And I was like, how do I navigate this? It's clear she needs some emotional. It's clear she had the emotional, like, she needed some emotional support and somebody to trust. Her nervousness of this issue that was impacting her well-being, and kind of how to navigate that and what to do. And through that friendship that we built, that was where I was able to start to maybe share some of the stresses that I was going through at home or with my daughter or with my family. And that bond is there to this day. Like, she was my mentor, and I can't say that the first 6 months it was like that, because it was very much more of that transactional. Okay, we're starting a gym. Here's what we need to do from an operations standpoint. We need to create. I mean, that was when we were like trying to figure out how to use an Excel document to create some type of spreadsheet. We didn't even have a cash register yet to collect income, and then And then for me at GlobalTranz, so I didn't come on until 2017 as a vendor. But as you mentioned, Renee and Angie and yourself and the other Angie and Emily and Wanda and so many women were so welcoming to me. So I got to see the after effects of your work there and your female leadership. And, you know, I have a fond connection, and it felt like, again, I came into a space where I felt comfortable sharing, you know, some of the things that were going on in my life. And I remember, you know, Angie had mentioned something to me. She knew something was off because my face gave it away. I still was a little unsure in a corporate world what emotions to express. And
what's acceptable. Yeah.
and wow, it just, my shoulders relaxed. I just felt so much like, you know, we talk about the great resignation today. When you feel that you can show up with your messy self, but still accomplish what you need to get done, and maybe have some support for that day to just get through whatever the nuances are, the stress, you know, the work-life stress, that does wonders to where my brain honestly hasn't even thought about what's next. You know, I'm very present when I come to work. I'm very thankful.
Sure.
You know, and I think that for people that aren't in that space or haven't found that, you know, the first starting point is to open your voice, you know, and if you're not in a situation where you're comfortable to do that, maybe that's not the place for you.
Right. Yeah, I think what popped into my head when you were just talking is kind of being stuck in that survival, right? And it's almost like that's where everybody was living up until mental health really started to become a priority. Everyone's just going into work in some kind of fight or flight survival mode, right? You're just kind of trying to survive. You don't bring anything else in, right? You leave everything at the door, and then you're just kind of surviving through work, because it's not acceptable to bring those things into work, you know. And I think we're slowly, you know, now kind of transitioning out of that, where to your point, it's okay, you know, people we have lives, right? And you have daily struggles, and those struggles change from day to day. And it's okay to kind of explore that, and because otherwise you're exactly right, it's hard to come in and knowing that, you know, you might have other challenges that, you know, you're dealing with, whether work or personal, you know, whether it's related between the two. But it's so forbidden, almost taboo, right, to talk about anything that requires emotions. I'll also never forget one of the first, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, one of the first, I think I was a director at the time, and I had a entry level manager who was a female at GlobalTranz that had just taken that job, and she was the first female. We'll call her. It was a capacity manager job, first female capacity manager that we had role. And you know, she would, you know, come in and show emotions at the time. And when I say emotions, like cry, you know, like she had a stressful moment, there would be tears. And you know, she always made sure to do it those doors where people kind of knew it was happening, but it wasn't necessarily out on the floor, we'll say. And that was kind of the first moment for me where she was so embarrassed by it, you know, trying to kind of sit down. It's conversations of, hey, it's okay to show this emotion, you know. Of course, yeah, like obviously you want to control in certain scenarios, but it's not a bad thing. Like that's how she felt, like it was bad and negative and taboo. And it's like, no, it's okay, just because you're showing emotion differently than maybe some of the, you know, some of the male managers out there, that's all right. And I'll never forget that, because that hit home of, hey, like you don't need to hide these things. Like this job is very stressful, you know, and it's okay to let those feelings out, you know, with people. But you know, you're ingrained at times, you know, to your point. Can I show this? Can I not? What's acceptable? What's not? And it is nice, right, to just not have to worry about that all the time, because that's, you know, that's a lot of stress to carry.
Well, that goes back to that piece where you talked about it's okay to be kind, you know, to be empathetic, you know, to actually care about the people. versus just the process. But I think that definitely silver lining of COVID is more people are cognizant of the importance of employee well-being, and now people feel more empowered to speak up and leave if need be, because we've learned that our mortality is just a breath away, really. And if we're not connecting at work in a way where we feel some purpose in life, or and for everybody it's going to be different, we're reevaluating how we're spending our time, and I think hopefully the message the universe has sent us, we're receiving, and more people in leadership roles continue to create a space where people feel supported in their mental, physical, emotional, and even spiritual well-being. Because it's spirituality, a lot of people don't talk about it in the workplace, and I do in my role, and it's not of a certain religionism, but it's just that inner perspective of we're so much more than just our physical bodies. We're all connected to this greater power, whatever that is, and we've created a working environment that's very flowing, that's very dynamic, that's growing with technology and in our space, and the services we provide. It's high stress, but I think that we can create a safe working environment for our teams to be successful, so that they're not experiencing burnout, anxiety, and what has typically shown up in the freight broker space.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that we've definitely seen a shift. I think that companies and their employees, typically you're united in one common goal, right? You just classify it, I guess, as success, but that success, used to might be success, right? Or the company's monetary gain, or even then your personal status, right, as an individual. And I think that we've seen a shift over the course of the last few years. I think that today's definition of success is really reflecting, now it's kind of the overall health and well-being of the company and its employees, right?
Yes.
You have your company that might do well, right? Record-breaking quarters or years, whatever it is, but now it's the company and its employees. I think companies have become more aware of this, whether that's to the great resignation, whatever it is, whether people are now realizing, that we are, mortal, right? And maybe it has become more of a spiritual shift alongside with everything else. But I think either way, they become more aware, and how they influence the lives and well-being of their employees, because healthy leadership and, healthy companies, that starts with healthy employees. It starts with the employees, and the people, and I think that we've come a long way and starting to realize that, not just through GlobalTranz, but other companies as well. And you have to really start to foster positive interactions between management and employees. And going back to what I was saying, you have to encourage that open communication, and the exchanges, with knowledge, whether it's specific to how the employee's feeling, where are they at as far as their well-being, how are they managing their workload, their overall employee experience. To me, it comes down to the communication at both the leadership level, the employee level, and leaders have to foster that, and they have to encourage that, make their employees feel comfortable voicing their opinions and experiences of how they're, taking in their work environment. I think we've come a long way with that. I think there's a big shift. Our leaders, at least myself, and I know my leaders, are very willing to listen, and then follow that with taking the necessary actions to support their employees in the right ways. And so I think we've seen a shift over the last year. Again, it's really becoming more about not just the company and employees, what's the overall health of the company. So I think that's really great to see.
Yeah, it's more of a transformational style type of leadership. Um, what are some top tips or top suggestions you would give employees as well as leadership that you have found super helpful to help with employee engagement in terms of expressing what their needs are in a way where they feel unjudged, they're not going to be reprimanded, they're going to feel supported, and that they're going to show up in a more happier mental status to go through all the challenges of their day-to-day responsibilities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. From my experience, it's listening to your employees and gaining that feedback. And so whether that's by surveying employees, right? If you want to put out, whether it's anonymous survey, I've gotten to the point now where if I ask employees, they're very vocal. I think because again, we've fostered that. We want them to feel, it's taken years, but they know they can communicate, whether it's straight to myself, whether to their direct manager. They can communicate openly and not have risk attached to that, right? Not have be reprimanded or any kind of retaliation. So we fought, but in getting there, that's might start with, surveys, surveying your employees, whether, like I said, it's anonymous, if not, but you really have to start with gaining that feedback, but then, like I said before, being able to act on that feedback. It's one thing to gain all these feedback and start to understand all these areas that maybe your employees need a little bit more help or a little bit more attention, and then not doing anything with that information. So you have to act on that. And I think upon that action, then your employees will start to realize, okay, well, they are listening. So then that then starts that open, fostering of communication and understanding, okay, I can speak up and they are going to listen, and then they're also going to do something about it. So I think whatever way you can gain that feedback from your employees and then make the necessary changes to support what areas they need a little bit more attention or help on is really, really important. For us, that we learned over time, I think going remote was a really big one. And it's funny because, rewind 3 years ago, I would never thought that my team could have done what they do, what their day-to-day job entails from home. I would have never thought that it was even a thing, not a possibility. And it's crazy, how we made that transition and how seamless it was.
And successful as a company.
So successful as a company, right? Exactly. Not even just my team, but the company as a whole. I mean, but that says something, and that opened my eyes, not to kind of trail off in a different direction, but that opened my eyes to a lot of things, because for one, the first thing it said is that you don't always have to do things because it's the way they've always been done. It was always, oh, you do this job in an office. And I was convinced of that until we were forced to go remote. And I realized, wow, we really can do this. But secondly, the employees did so well with it. We actively were putting out surveys to them. Do you prefer this, or do you prefer to be in the office? So we could get a better understanding of, okay, well, we're successful here, but what do the employees want? So we made sure to survey them regularly, not just one and done, regularly asking them, what do you prefer? Because you might prefer to be remote the first 6 months versus now 2 years later, right? Maybe some people are like, okay, I've had enough of remote work. I need to go back to the office, right? You change. It doesn't work for everybody. So we continued, to survey those employees and really gain that feedback. And we realized 99% of them, if not all of them, prefer to be remote. So we listened to that, and I know other companies, as I'm sure you have, forcing people back into the office, right? And then that's creating the part of the Great Resignation of people, now, sourcing for other jobs because they don't want to go back into the office. And, we have no reason to do that. We're actually listening to our employees and saying, okay, it's working. What do you prefer? Like, what works best for you as far as that work-life balance? And At least specific to my team, they want to be home, they want to be remote. So we're going to listen to that and we're going to act on that. So, that's my advice to leadership is figure out the best route for you to gain the feedback from your employees, and then make sure you're acting on it, whatever that might be. Some of it might not be feasible to what the employee wants, right? Within reason, of course, but do something to kind of show that you're listening and you are willing to act where and when you can.
I concur. So we've sent out numerous surveys as well in terms of health and wellness programming, because it's really not about what I want or you want or leadership wants. It's what does the employee want? And if we're sending out these surveys and then we're not delivering on the feedback, then we're not going to get employee buy-in, and then we're going to have less engaged employees, and then we'll have deal with the whole retention variable. I'm curious, when you evaluate your team performance management at different times during the year, what does that process look like? And I ask this for two reasons, and this just something popped into my head based upon something you had said. When I had some folks working under me in the wellness center, I can recall completing a performance evaluation, and then we sent it in to our people ops team for review before we present it to the employee. And then I sat down with the employee and we went over it, and there was a disagreement in the words that I used on the performance evaluation. And I could tell that it was someone I valued, did a good job, but certain words that I used were a trigger for this employee. And I could tell when they read the evaluation that they were having a physiological response that wasn't what I had anticipated.
Oh, wow.
So when I noticed it, I said, hey, why don't you take a couple minutes to regroup, go into the locker room, come back and we'll have a discussion. So this person came back into the room, we sat down, we had a conversation, and they explained a couple words that I used that were really descriptive in nature, words that we would pretty much always use, like the word demonstrated or did not demonstrate or failed to, and wow, as a manager, I really was bothered by that because it changed their whole energy level, and I was very aware of how much they were invested in their role. But there were some behaviors that needed to be addressed. And I thought that I was doing it in a kind way. So anyway, long story short, I went to our leadership team and I changed it. And they were like, why did you change that? And I was like, well, I sat down with this person and we had a conversation, and there were two words in particular that really triggered them. And, I was advised, hey, actually, that was a very thorough evaluation. There was no need for you to change it. And then it was one of those where I could have said, oh, okay. But I felt so much compassion and empathy for this person who had disclosed something that I was not aware of that prompted their response, that I was like, you know what? I really don't want this to be on their record. I don't want this to be in their, in their documents, in their forms. So, so I changed it and I resubmitted it and we signed off on it. But anyway, I'm just curious if you had a similar incident. So how do you feel about that whole process? Particularly if you come across someone who maybe you didn't know there was something there that might not sit really well with them, and still be the manager and hold them accountable, but be empathetic as well.
Interesting. So we have come across that more from a customer service, I think, standpoint, we deal with, we have 700 agents through GlobalTranz that we support. So that's where most of their interactions are with those individuals who are kind of a hybrid between a partner, an employee, but also a customer. So most of the time, those instances will arise when they've had some kind of engagement, or I should say interaction with said agent. And it's more from a customer service standpoint, where it's interesting because a lot of times this is where it usually comes to a head is, a lot of the communication will take place over email, right? So it's usually because the agent is being responsive and just very direct. So they might be missing, say, a please or a thank you. It's just a very direct transactional interaction, and so 9 times out of 10, the situations we run into when you speak of triggers, that's where it comes from, is because our employees are like, well, they're being rude, and so kind of walking them through that scenario and having them understand, just because they didn't add a smiley face at the end of the sentence doesn't particularly mean that, they're being personally rude to you. But it's very triggering to a lot of people, which is great, right? Because I think that means we've evolved, that maybe as a community and a professional community, that we are treating people more kindly, right? But a lot of times I think that they'll confuse that with disrespect. The directness translates to disrespect, but then somehow that disrespect translates to personal disrespect. Like, and so I just had a scenario last week where we were kind of, the employee said, oh, they're being very rude. And we went back through the communication. It's like, no, they're just being directed. Did they say anything particularly that was disrespectful to you as a person? And it's like, no, but there was no please, no thank you. They were just, and so it's kind of working through those types of triggers for people that are always interesting, because you understand it, but there's a fine line between someone being direct and then, of course, personally disrespectful to you as a person. So those are the kind of experiences that I deal with a lot on my side, which is always interesting.
That's where emotional regulation really comes into play. Yes, you articulated what I was trying to ramble about perfectly. I was very direct in my performance evaluation, whereas had it been an email, I would have actually inserted a smiley face or some kind of emotional context for them. So, and
it would have been non-triggering. It's immediately non-triggering at that point.
But it's, I had Tracy Martin on the pod recently, and we actually were having this conversation where she is in the restoration, bathroom and kitchen restoration, and deals a lot with supply chain and some of the challenges, particularly with the war now as well. And she had said the same thing, like sometimes with communication in an email or in a document or in a text, there's still a lot of nuance for interpretation that might not be necessarily correct. Maybe someone's in a rush and they're doing something, they're just responding quickly and they're very direct, and then based upon how we're feeling it, we may put some projections into that communication and then create a lot of unnecessary emotions and responses within our bodies in particular, and that just can like throw a whole energy off, really. But
absolutely,
it's interesting.
It's interesting.
And with customer service, it's there are always these little areas where you can get hit with something out of nowhere, and then just be mindful of how best to respond to calm the waters a little bit, and then build bridges again. So
diffusing, and in transportation, it's very stressful, and so things can get escalated fairly quickly, depending on what that individual is dealing with at that given moment. So we try to focus on just diffusing situations and then escalate to a manager, right? That's our big thing. Just and pass it on. Let somebody else in that scenario, now it's okay to give someone else your problem.
Mhm.
Let a manager deal with it.
Yes.
It's the best way to diffuse.
Yeah, so I think that your whole take on, being kind and being, a nice person really does resonate with me, as a female, as a leader. And I think that the more that we can teach or educate our teams on how best to go out our day in a way that we're facilitating the opportunity to have honest, authentic conversations, and then provide resources or training or whatever the need is, so that we can maybe avoid some of the pitfalls that come up, is really going to benefit our industry. And maybe, hopefully, we'll start to see some of the risk factors that we're seeing, including obesity and, like I mentioned before, type 2 diabetes and cancer and heart disease and strokes and all of those chronic inflammation, diseases that show up 5, 10, 15 years down the road. Hopefully will help avoid some of those health risks and create a welcoming environment where people can be a little more relax their shoulders, really focus their energy on whatever it is that they need to get done, have the tools and the resources to do so. And then if, oh shit happens, they feel supported to come to a manager or talk to a coworker, and then get the support they need to make it happen. But I also, I wanted to finish up or ask you, like, what are your daily self-care habits or things that you find are helpful to you when you feel you need a little support? Maybe your energies, maybe you notice that your energy's off. Like, what are some things that you found helpful that maybe some listeners might want to try and see if.
Yeah. So, well, for me, a couple of things. Movement, as I'm sure you can relate to, right? I know you're very, very active, by far more active than I myself am. When I'm, whether it's just low energy or mental fatigue, getting outside and moving. We know in the hot summer months, of course, you can't. If it's 1 p.m. in the afternoon, the chances of you getting outside will probably make you feel worse than better. But, I have an indoor bicycle here. So I love, even if it's just a 15-minute bike ride, that changes my physical and mental space almost immediately. So I'm a big fan of movement.
Yes.
Sunlight, but that was a discovery process too, right? I mean, everybody says it, exercise, sunlight, being outdoors. But I find that, when I get outside, it's almost, you tend to, and I lived with this through my own self-discovery of what solutions I needed to feed myself. But it's so stuck within the four walls of, I'll say GlobalTranz, but it could be anything. If you're inside, you don't take breaks, your mind's so easy stuck of, this is it, like, this is my world, right?
Yeah.
You're dealing with. So it's important to be able to disconnect, go outside or leave the room, right? You go out and you realize that the world is so much bigger than dealing with at your computer screen. That really helps adjust mentally, when I'm dealing with something, is being able to go outside and kind of, and it might not necessarily being, I don't know how to describe it as connecting with nature, but it just realizes, I know that helps a lot of people, realizing again that this problem I'm dealing with isn't as big as, the world that's surrounding me. At times you just get so, it's almost like the walls are kind of closing in, and you have to take a step back to realize life's going to go on. I always joke, I say, we're not shipping babies. If this load is late or nobody's going to die. Someone's just not going to get
Yeah.
their water, their
Yes.
vegan water or whatever it is.
Yeah.
We're not shipping babies. It's not that serious.
Yeah. It's not
So
life-threatening. We're not in danger.
It's not exactly. You're not in danger. So for me, it's disconnecting from that mentally, whether it's outside or doing a quick exercise. That's huge for me. There's a lot of talk and content, which I'm trying to get into, but that's a slow process for me because my brain is it's hard to slow down, as a lot of people deal with. I know when they're embarked on meditation challenge. And being in the present, and I mentioned this in that article I did. You got to be present. That's by far, I think, challenge, but also solution for me is whatever I'm doing, be present with it. And then when you're done, be present in the next thing. Because I think that's really hard. And if you can't be present in the moment, and you're constantly worrying about the future or the past, or, the specific problem that you're dealing with that day, you could never really be living, in the moment and really experiencing that joy, from start to finish 100%. So, with everything that you're doing, I think is huge.
So I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, you're very mindful. So really, meditation, Dustine, is about being mindful.
I know.
So you are doing it.
You're right. Maybe I don't know. No one's ever explained it to me that way, but yes, maybe I am meditating. I don't even realize it.
So, so like when you're outside, you're slowing your mind down and you're being very present in the moment.
Yeah.
And then when you're working and you're focused on whatever the task is, you're very present.
Yeah.
And, I think that, again, now, and when you're present and you're focused, you're not ruminating on thoughts of the past or anticipating the future. And that's a beautiful way to try to live in the most helpful way, and not get stuck in, as you referenced earlier, thinking that this is all there is, like every day dreading, this is the same thing. I know it's going to happen. I know my customers, I know this is going to have to put out this fire, that fire, and then you're really not present.
Yeah.
And that's where I think a lot of burnout happens.
I completely agree. Yeah. And it's tough, I get it. And for us in the logistics industry, that's what's become really important to me with my employees and myself as well, is being able to disconnect, being able to, technology, it's amazing, and it's done amazing things and really kind of pushed us into areas of innovation I'm sure we never imagined it could be. But at the same time, it's causing a lot of those problems that you referenced earlier, some of the illnesses that people are dealing with, because it's created a sense of not being able to disconnect, right? And constantly ruminating and while also being inundated with other things, outside of what you're trying to be present on. So, being able to disconnect and offering that for employees, it goes back to communication and surveying and getting feedback. We've taken feedback and tried to build, for example, our after-hour support teams. We've really tried to bulk that up so that our employees can feel comfortable disconnecting at the end of the day when they're done, and knowing that, the business that they work so hard for during the day is in good hands, because transportation never stops, right? It's 24/7. Things are moving even when we're sleeping. So just being certain things in place, really advocating for your employees is big for me, because they're not going to do it for themselves. They might not speak up, even though we try to foster that open communication, but you really have to make a conscious effort to advocate for your employees and yourself, and to build the necessary structures around them to make sure that they're supported and being able to disconnect and doing some of those mindful things, right, to make sure that their mental health space is staying intact and healthy.
Yes, like our one of our core values: lead the way, be the change you want to see, do the right thing, make it happen, better together. As a leader, you're demonstrating that, you're practicing that every day, and that in turn, Dustine, I'm quite certain helps your team feel empowered to disconnect when needed, and just helps them feel more fulfilled in their role at GlobalTranz. I think we should leave.
So.
I think so. I'm pretty sure I've heard through the grapevine. Well, I like to always close the pod. First of all, thank you for your time. I know you're super busy, and we wanted to get together to have this chat for quite some time. And I value what you bring to our team, and everyone. I mention your name, and I hear nothing but positive things, as well as our interaction when we were together in person. So thank you for that, and thank you for being one of the early female leaders amongst our team.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. You are so welcome, and thank you for the site. And same to you. I love everything that you do for the company and everything you're putting out in the community. I think it's awesome, and we are so thankful as a company to have you to support us.
Likewise. So let's leave our listeners with an action item. So I had a different one I was thinking of, but now that you mentioned the importance of disconnecting and or being present throughout the day, which do you think would be best to ask listeners to engage in or disengage in?
Right. Yeah. So to disengage in. I would say be present. Yeah, I mean, they're both equally valuable, right? But if you can be present in everything that you're doing, I think that's a huge step towards mindfulness, and just, finding purpose in what you're doing, being present, because then you're truly enjoying life, and you don't want to take the joy out of living, obviously. So I think being present.
I like that. So let's put it this way, action item. I would say try to facilitate a mindset where you're present for at least 90 minutes, a 90-minute bout where you're avoiding any distraction and you're really showing up focused on whatever the goal is for those 90 minutes, and then disengage. Give yourself 5 minutes to go outside and disengage and just embrace the environment outside. Take a breath, practice some gratitude. Maybe, as you mentioned in the article, reach out to someone, send a text or whatever, just letting them know that you're thinking about them, and then come back in and then be present as well for the next 90-minute segment. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. We hope that you found some insightful information in our conversation. And if you have any questions or comments or content you would like to listen to, just send us an email at worklife360podcast@gmail.com. Thank you, Freight 360, for your continued support. Thanks, Dustine. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too, Rana. Thanks for having me.
Sure.
Bye.
Thanks for staying late. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.